this is Henry Sanders from Madison 365. I am honored today to bring you, I think, an unprecedented and a very unique panel, town hall of some Black men who are leading, law officials who are leading our state in really meaningful ways. I'm excited to have this conversation because, we often talk about police, what they're doing or not doing, representation. But we have some Black men who are leading some major places in our state. We have a Black police chief from Beloit. We have a Black police chief from Milwaukee. We have a Black police chief from Madison. We have a sheriff now in Dane County. And then we have a Black sheriff in Milwaukee County. It's unprecedented. And sometimes in Wisconsin, we get a bad rap. But we also should applaud when we're moving in the right direction for having people of color, Black men leading the organization. Now, I know that some of you are saying, just because they have representation don't mean they represent us. But that's why I want to have the conversation. And that's why I want to bring these men here to talk about where we're at now and where we're going to go. So first, let me start. So I'm biased. I'm a Madison dude. So I'm biased, right? So I'm gonna start with the Madison chief just because I can, I guess, right? I'm going to do that. No, so Chief Barrett, how you doing, sir?
Doing well. Thank you for having me.
How's everything going for you so far?
So far, so good. It's been a great transition. I was appointed in December and immediately began working and trying to get to know our Madison community, but officially started February 1 of this year.
Well, thank you for joining us. And I know my Milwaukee folks are on me already. I can get my texts. So, Chief Norman, sir, how are you doing?
Excellent, brother. Thank you.
And how's everything going for you?
Well, I mean, as we all know, every day is a challenge in regards to dealing with the violence, and we have some issues in regards to again the watershed moment of law enforcement. But I can say this: I am here. I'm in the present. I'm blessed by the best, and appreciate that you got to Milwaukee, even though you gave a shout out to Madison first. I'm not going to hold you against that. I'm not going to turn my Zoom off, but appreciate it.
I'm joking. I always give my Milwaukee family a hard time. Beloit, I'm going to come to you next. Chief Sayles, how are you doing, sir?
Well, excellent. Thank you for this opportunity today.
And how's everything going for you? You're also new in your position. How's everything going for you?
Yes, recently appointed to Chief of Police here in the city of Beloit on April 19, 2021. Everything's going very good for me here. I've been here 17 years, so it's been an easy transition. I don't have to come in and learn the community. I'm just implementing things now that I've already been doing here at the city of Beloit, so things have been going pretty smooth for me.
Yeah, well, I love Beloit. I got a lot of friends in Beloit. So actually, my best friend, Ty Evans, is from Beloit area. So
I know Ty Evans.
Okay, yeah, really good friend of mine. So thank you, Chief. As Dane County Sheriff, Mr. Barrett, how are you, sir? I almost called you County Exec. I almost called you County Exec. How you doing, Mr. Barrett?
I'm doing well today. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And officially when next May 9th, is it?
Yeah, May 9th is the official day when I start. Things have been going well over the past several weeks. Had a great opportunity to be brought into the organization a few weeks early by the current sheriff, Dave Mahoney, and we're just going to ensure that there's a smooth transition as May 9th is right around the corner. So I'm excited for the opportunity to lead.
Well, thank you for joining us. And I know you've already been working before May 9th, but when the May 9th happens officially, congratulations.
Thank you.
Milwaukee County Sheriff, Mr. Lucas, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Mr. Sanders. Let me thank you. Let me thank Madison 365 for bringing all of this power together. Let me thank all of my colleagues. It's a pleasure, opportunity to work and certainly make a difference in our communities. And I'm just so happy to be a part of this forum today.
Thank you, sir. So I have the first question I have for you, gentlemen, is, we will be taking questions live on Facebook. So if you do have questions, we will be taking them. We can't get to all of them, but we will try to do what we can. So the first question, what was your reaction to the verdict of the trial of Derek Chovin when that happened? What was your first reaction? My first reaction was he actually got convicted. That was my first reaction. But what was your first reaction as law officials? What was your first reaction? I'll start with Chief Barnes.
I appreciate you saying that, because I had the opportunity to watch the verdict with some community members who invited me for that. Really was a monumental occasion, I think. And I saw the community members, like you said, they were surprised. And that really was kind of disheartening to me, because I had followed the trial, obviously, and I felt that the prosecution had a great case. I felt that the actions of the officer were not only beyond policy, but beyond reason, and certainly shocked my conscience. And so it wasn't a surprise to me, but what was a surprise was our community members hoping that they would see justice in the face of, an obvious miscarriage of justice in what Derek Chauvin did on that day. But what it did was it really renewed my efforts in what I'm doing in this particular role, why I decided to be a police chief, and that is to make the lives better of people who quite frankly, really need us. And I think that that trial really gave me some energy to communicate better with my community, to go back and, of course, look at policy, and, of course, to make sure, most importantly, that the culture of the Madison Police Department is a culture where that could never happen. I think our community deserves that, and I think that's my number one responsibility after watching that verdict.
Interesting to talk about culture, because I want to come back to that, because culture is very interesting when it comes to police departments.
Yes.
And the culture. And I don't think we talk about that enough as a community. But Chief Norman, same question to you. What was your first reaction to the trial?
Well, Henry, I'll be very honest. I wasn't surprised. I believe that there was enough evidence, as Chief Barnes talked about, in regards to the video evidence, the testimony. I know that my wife was watching it more closely than I, and, talking about some of the children testimony that was very impactful and actually disturbing at the same point because of what they were exposed to. But I will fall also into the dialogue that I believe we're going to see a trend in regards to level of accountability, in regards to that these particular activities, actions that is against humanity, against the law, will be, again, being held to a standard that should have always been held. I mean, if you look at what happened with the McDonald case in Chicago, granted, they did not see the type of consequences that, a lot of the public was outcrying for, but there was that accountability of that particular behavior and action that is saying that, you're not above the law. So looking at, from my perspective, I came into this particular role back in December 2020 with a 4-point stance, where one of it is accountability in regards to reestablishing my commitment to that term, in regards to saying that if I'm accountable, everyone below me is accountable. No one's off limits when it comes to accountability, especially as a chief executive, which means that leadership is brought into that level of accountability, which we don't talk about often. We talk about the officers and the individuals with the low-hanging fruit that you see on these videos. But I always say, when you have a bad situation of an officer or investigator, there's a bad boss behind that. Either they're being not aware, or they encourage in regards to behaviors, which neither one is acceptable. So that's a recommitment upon us. I know my colleagues on this panel have all probably have said to themselves in regards to making sure that we are not going to allow those behaviors to rise up or go unchallenged.
So already you two, chiefs, have said some really unique stuff. One, Chief Barnes said he was actually in the community when he saw the trial and the verdict came out, which is, you don't usually hear that from a lot of police chiefs. So that's interesting. And Chief Norman, if I think I heard you correctly, you basically said the buck stops with the boss. Like, whoever's in charge, he's a part of the culture, also leads back to that person in charge. That is something we never hear. I don't really hear that coming from the police culture. So we got to dig into that, because that opened up a lot of different things. I'm going to come to Sheriff Barrett, and I'm going to ask you the same question. What was your reaction?
You were breaking up there. Were you talking to me, Henry?
Yes, sir. What was your reaction?
It was. I was not surprised as well as I followed the trial very closely, and was able to observe the overwhelming evidence that was against the officer in this case. But I was happy to see some form of accountability and some form of justice as well, and not just in the verdict, but also in the fact that the Minneapolis police chief and other officers actually testified against the excessive actions by the officer, which I felt promotes the idea that we as peace officers will no longer stand by and let other officers commit heinous crimes or act inappropriately. And I think that's the start in the beginning to building trust with our communities, is the moment that we as leaders start pointing out inappropriate behavior by our counterparts.
Thank you. Same question to you, Chief Sayles.
Once again, I wasn't surprised by the verdict. It was one of those things where, you sit back and you follow it very closely, because being that leader of a department at that time, you want to make sure that you're one of the people leading the charge in change in law enforcement, and making sure that you are implementing policies at your department to make sure you're treating your community members with respect and dignity. So it's one of those things where we look at accountability. We hold our officers here accountable. It's one of the things I've talked to about my groups, with my groups here at the Beloit Police Department in regards to accountability. When we go out on a daily basis, we don the uniform, and there's a lineage of people that come before us that represent this uniform with respect, and we need to go out and do the same thing. So it's one of those situations where when that officer was found guilty on all charges, it was a sense of relief that we finally got one right. But at the same time, though, I had to pull myself back and say, we're running a marathon right now, and I can't cheer that I started the race. I got to finish out the entire marathon, and it's going to be a marathon that we're going to be involved in. And there's other officers that are also doing the same things, and those individuals need to be held accountable as well. I'm proud to say that I believe everyone here at the Beloit Police Department would not tarnish our badge that we put on a daily basis, or our uniform. I have close relationships with them here at the Beloit Police Department. I've been involved with the hiring process over the last 6 years, so I know we brought in great cops. But the biggest thing is accountability, holding our officers accountable for the things that they do, and also holding myself accountable and my administrative staff.
Wow. Accountability is already the theme of this town hall already. Sheriff Lucas, same question to you, sir.
Well, I too was relieved by the verdict. When you look at the American system of jurisprudence, it hasn't always worked to deliver justice to particularly communities of color and those persons that have been victimized at the hands of law enforcement. As my counterparts have previously stated, it brought accountability to the actions of certainly Officer Chovin. But as was indicated, we can't cheer just now a conviction. There's got to be accountability with the penalty phase as well. And then there's other instances of disparate treatment of Black and brown people in America that has to have justice brought to those situations as well. So while it was certainly relieved that the verdict came down the way it did, we still have a long way to go yet in restoring justice and delivering justice to people all across this country.
Thank you, Jim, for answering that question. That gives me hope that you all, I was shocked. I'm glad none of you were. That's good to hear. So I have a different question, and you probably never get a question like this, but as Black men who are leading police forces, how do you, I don't know if any of you have children or, grandkids, uncles, nieces. I was last year, give you an example. Last year I was at Mount Zion Church here in Madison, and it was a men's summit or something like that. And we were talking about policing and what happens when police stop them. Everyone to a person. I bet there was 25, 30 people in that room, 70-year-olds to kids, all said, my dad taught me I was trained to do this. I was trained to put my hands up. You could tell that you could feel the tension in the room about what happens when a police officer stops them and what they should do. And I remember at that point saying, wow, this is a generational issue. So as Black officers, the culture, what would you tell a young person what would you train them if they're about to be stopped by a police officer to being stopped? What do you train your kids, or what would you train your kids to do? I'll start with Sheriff Barrett.
Yeah, well, I have young children that thank goodness aren't able to drive yet, but it's something that we are definitely have. My wife and I have prepared the conversations to ensure that they are in a position where they are keeping their hands visible and they're compliant to all of the demands of the officer at that time. They are privy to an understanding and a perspective that a typical community member may not be privy to, and that's just with me being a law enforcement officer. So their understanding and perception of what may happen may be a little different, but the basic instructions will be the same, and that's just to follow all commands and be sure to follow all the instructions as well, just in the name of safety for everyone involved.
Got it. So race never comes up in the conversation for you, like, you know, I have a white wife, so I'm a little different, right? But as my dad's an attorney, my dad would have told me, hey, look, you are black and you're driving. Don't do anything foolish. You drive, survive. My dad would say survive. If there's something to fight the next day. What would you, Chief Norman, what would you tell your kids or people young to youth if they're about to get stopped and pulled over as a person of color, black youth?
So the first thing I'd like to start off by even saying is actually sad we have to have these discussions. Actually disturbing that we have to understand the reality of what we live in. But with that being said, I have a young black son and a young black daughter. And yes, these discussions have come up at the table many times, and it's out of fear of the lack of understanding of what it means to be human to each other. So those conversations talk about in regards to first of all, realizing your blackness, understanding that, you know, sometimes people make determinations about you before actually getting to know who you are. And that coming from that perspective, understanding that respect, cooperation, and fight another day, not on the streets. Too often we want to be an advocate in the wrong situation, whether it's a dark alley or at a, you know, store, or, you know, that's not your moment. But we also have to have an understanding just of what we expect our kids to be carrying themselves. But we all know that things can happen anywhere. But I do a lot of motivational speaking. I tell my kids, you judge by the company that you keep. Be careful of those associations, because that puts you also in a compromising situation. But yeah, it hurts my heart to have these conversations. Hurts my heart that, you know, I shouldn't, even as a chief, be worried about what it's about to have without my uniform on. You know, I talked to a lot of my compadres, people on this panel, in regards to how that experience is in our, you know, respective communities or outside. So it is a unfortunate, necessary conversation. It's a realistic conversation. It gives you understanding about how to lead, what we need to work on within our own respective departments. We have to have it in a critical, crucial, and honest conversation. And this ain't something in the pie in the sky and could just be superficial.
Yeah, thank you for that. Chief Barnes, I'll ask you the same question.
No, Harry, I have one son, only one son, and he is my heart and soul. And if any hair on his head is harmed by anybody, it's going to be a different story. I'm just going to tell you that right now. I'm just going to have a moment of just being honest with you on that.
Yeah.
I love my son dearly, and he's not at the driving age yet, but we've had these conversations because he's just one of those kids that's always in tune to what's going on in the news. And I've had to sit down and talk to him about some of the things he's seen police officers do, because that's not his experience. That's not the experience of his father. That's not the experience of some of my friends who are police officers who've known my son since birth. But as the other chiefs spoke, I do the same thing. You talk to them about being respectful to everyone, by the way, to their teachers. You know, I established a culture in my home. Talk. I had the opportunity to go back to school and work on a PhD. And in doing so, I began to work on racial profiling in traffic stops. And the reason I did that is because I realized that I'd never had anyone other than someone from my community. I'd never had anyone other than a Black.
Oh, he's frozen on my end.
Same here.
As a police officer affects other people.
So, Mr. Chief Barnes, I felt like you said something real powerful there, and you froze a little bit. So, do you mind? So, do you mind?
Yeah, let me. I'm sorry. Let me work on my connectivity. You can go to someone else.
Okay. I mean, come back. Don't leave us. Sheriff Lucas, I ask you the same question.
Well, I often tell a story of as a young child myself, an encounter with law enforcement, which inspired me to join the profession. It was one where I was accused of stealing a woman's purse and told the officer no. And the officer made an assessment that after a while, let me move on. This young man is not involved in any crime. I think one of the things that our young people have to be taught is to have the confidence in know thyself, number one, in terms of their interaction with a law enforcement officer or with any other individual. And then two, the respect that was mentioned previously, have the respect for the individual. Often, I'm out making stops and individuals want to escalate right away and they want to get indignant. And I try to de-escalate that right away and say, look, a young man, young lady, I'm trying to educate you. Don't want to have to enforce anything at this point right now. But let me just try to educate you on what it is that what you have done, what you have committed. And so as a result, again, if we learn to have the confidence in thyself, know thyself, and certainly have the respect of that law enforcement officer that is doing his or her job, I think we can avoid some of the situations that we have seen. You know, when you juxtapose the situation that I had as a young boy and the situations that brown and Black men and women of color today experience, a lot of it deals with the trust that we don't have in law enforcement today. So we've got a lot of work to do in our country and in our communities of restoring that trust. And it's part on the community, but it's also on law enforcement as well.
What's interesting what you just said, Sheriff Lucas, is that interaction with the police at a younger age could have had you hate the police or not trust the police, but somehow that did something opposite for you, made you want to engage and get into the police. That's an interesting story. I wish we had more time to dig into that. Chief Sayles, same question to you.
I have three young men, two of driving age. One is 22, and he's currently in the Air Force on his second tour of duty in Qatar. I have a 17-year-old that's been driving for the last year and a half or so. And it's very unfortunate that we have to have those conversations, as Chief Norman mentioned. And I go back to a story of last July 23rd, actually. It's unfortunate I still remember that date when my son was involved in a traffic accident, 17-year-old. And, he called me frantic in regards to it, said the police officer wasn't listening to him. He was T-boned. He was going through a red light or green light, and the car sped up and T-boned him. I left work and I showed up, and the officer was having a good old conversation with I called it suspect at the time because I felt that he ran the red light and hit my son. And he came over and issued my son a ticket and said, yeah, you got to show up this day for court, and you got to pay a $375 fine for going through a yellow light. And I said, can you expound on the citation? I said, he's a 16-year-old young man at that time. I said, he really doesn't understand the laws. And he looked me up and down, and I was in full uniform. He said, you're the dad, you can do it, and you're a police officer. And I explained to him, I said, let's step over to the side here. I said, I understand I'm a police officer. I said, I understand it's my son. I said, but sometimes you have to understand the community connection that you need with the youth is for you to take that time, have that procedural justice, and explain situations to young men of color that are involved in incidents with the law enforcement officers. I said, I don't feel you're doing that. And he looked at me and he said, doesn't matter if you're a captain or not. He said, you're not my captain. You can explain it to him. So what I did was I took it upon myself and I filed a complaint of my own against him in regards to the unfairness and the disrespect that he had for myself, my son, and the witnesses that tried to explain to him that my son was not at fault in this incident, but he didn't want to listen to my son or me at that time. So it was very unfortunate I had to have those conversations. My 17-year-old and my 14-year-old, they always have their friends over our house. I feel that that's a safe place for them. And I always talk to them about law enforcement stuff. It's one of those things where I'm not in uniform. They're in my domain, and I talk to them in the ways they need to represent themselves and also represent the families that they have. I go back to my mom. She always used to say, I don't know what you do when you leave this house. So make sure that you are representing us right. And I tell the young men that, they all play sports, and, sometimes they get home at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night from away games, and they have to drive. My son, he wants to be the cool one and have the nice car with the tinted windows. And I said, you're not getting tinted windows. Sorry. Because I understand what law enforcement officers do when they see the tinted windows driving at night. Hey, man, that's a drug dealer. Now let's make this traffic stop. This is one of those things where it's not a situation that's affecting our community with driving with tinted windows, but I don't let him have those tinted windows. And I say, when you are old enough to buy your own car and get your own tinted windows, you can do that. But right now, you're not going to do that. And these are the reasons why.
Well, it's interesting hearing all of you, right? So you all sound like the traditional Black fathers, right? You sound like your traditional Black father, which you would tell your kids, which is fascinating to me because you're also leading these organizations that have a culture. By you acknowledge that you have those conversations with your kids, you also have to acknowledge that there's a culture sometimes that there's some racism in the system. So how do you, and I'm going to get to, we have so many questions here, like I'm about to get to these questions, but how do you, as the chiefs or the sheriffs in these organizations with a culture that might not, like Chief Sayles' example is, might not back up your beliefs and your values, but you all talked about accountability. How do you deal with that culture of making sure that they are competent on race, that they are competent on how to interact with people when they stop? Chief Sayles is actually like a real example. Engage with the citizens, as he said, the community. How do you make sure that happens with the culture, recognizing that, again, this is my bias. You don't sound like typical police officers to me right now. Maybe that's my experience, but you don't sound like typical police officers to me right now. So how do you guys make sure that your cultures reflect your views as leaders? I'm going to start with Chief Barnes because you were off, and I'm going to start with you because thank you for coming back. We appreciate that.
Sorry about that.
I'm going to come to you next, Sheriff Lucas.
Was connectivity. I think we did pay the bill, just so anybody's worried about that. I think we did pay the bill. But, I think when I talk to people in the community, they say, this is what they say. They say, listen, Chief, I hear everything you're saying. It sounds good. That's all great, but I don't feel that when I'm out. When I get pulled over, the officer still has his hand on his gun. So what are you going to do as chief of police so that all this good stuff you're talking, I feel it on the street? And so for me, the answer to that is getting back to the basics of policing, which is neighborhood-oriented policing. Every officer has a neighborhood, and every neighborhood has an officer. Getting to know that neighborhood. I grew up in housing authority, housing projects, whatever name you may want to call it. There were many for it, but it was my home. And we knew our police officers kind of by name. We knew the ones that were good, the ones that wasn't going to be good, the ones that, the guys on the block wouldn't even move when they rode by, right? We knew that. But it was a relationship that was established because they weren't afraid to get out of their car. They knew the community, they knew the people. And although they may not live there, and certainly that's something that is up for debate, where police officers reside, but the work that they did made all the difference. And so in order for us to see that culture shift on the street, we have to ensure that officers are in proximity with their community, in proximity with the problem, in proximity with the problem people, so that they have a better understanding. And hopefully they get a better understanding of who we are as people as well.
Thank you for that, Chief Barnes. Sheriff Lucas, come to you. Same question. How do you lead that culture?
We learned through the civil rights struggle that Dr. King said that while we can't change the hearts of men, we can make laws to restrain the heartless. While I can't make a man love me, we certainly can do something about his or her conduct while they're under the employ of the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office or all our agencies. So I think it is knowing that while I can't change the heart of an individual, he or she know full well coming to work here at the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office that for those 8, 10, 12, 14 hours they're under our employ, they're going to conduct themselves to the high standards that we set in our organization. And they're going to be held accountable, that if their actions are not appropriate, that there's going to be consequences, that those consequences are going to be swift, and that they're going to be public to ensure not only to the people that we serve, that we hold our own accountable, but to their colleagues and peers, that there is a high standard that we have here in the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office, and that all of us have to adhere to those high standards.
Thank you, Sheriff. I'm going to come to, I'm think I want to hear this from, I'll pick it up. Let's hear what Chief Norman has to say about this. I guess, and I'm asking because one, I'm picking on you, but two, Milwaukee is one of the most segregated places in the country. And, you have a lot of challenges in Milwaukee. And so, how do you deal with that culture and leading that culture with your mindset, with the values I've heard you talk about so far? How do you deal with the culture?
Well, first of all, Henry, you're wrong for having me go after the great Sheriff Earnell Lucas. Anything I say, I don't know if it's ever going to be able to stand up to that, but I'm going to try. I look at leadership as starts with you. When you want to have any particular type of direction to be followed, you have to have legitimacy amongst your followers, meaning that you are going to walk according to the pathway that you set before your people. We all have those who are hypocritical in leadership positions where you don't have the capacity to really be trustworthy or find that there is credibility amongst the people who you lead. But I'm also a big reader. They always say, every great leader is a reader. I'm not saying I'm a great leader, but I believe in the one book by Jim Collins, Good to Great, getting the right people in the bus. As a executive of a large organization, you have to have key people who embodies what you believe in and will be able to be your speaking voice and box in those areas when you're not there. It's easy to have people walk in line when you're in the limelight or the sight of the chief officer, but how are they acting, behaving amongst those other leaders within your organization? So I tell people we did not get to where we're at overnight, and we're not going to get to where we need to be overnight, but a direction of changing culture is like a cruise ship, not a speedboat. Doesn't turn on a dime. But if you can gradually see it going in another direction, let's celebrate the small wins. Let's continue to encourage one another and ensure that we're holding each other selves accountable, as in what Sheriff Earnell Lucas, because I'm not afraid to make someone an example. We cannot sit there and talk about what we expect, but not willing to follow through. I've been known to always make sure that I'm not that person to play with. So it is important that we do set the tone. We model the behavior we expect from our people. You put key people in those arenas where, again, the most powerful, impactful leadership position is a sergeant, ensuring that they are equipped and understand their role and how impactful they are because they're on the front line. But again, believe in the small wins and move it to the big win.
Thank you. I wish I had more time. You said sergeant, everyone nodded their head. So whatever you said to them, they got it. I don't know what you just said, but okay. Sergeants. Chief Sayles, what about you?
One of the biggest things is, having those courageous conversations with your command staff. Once again, the sergeants. They're the ones that are.
For Chiefs, what does that mean? So explain to that layman person what's a sergeant in the department? That's the people out basically in the field.
Yeah, our sergeants are our first line supervisors.
Okay.
Here at the Beloit Police Department, we have our sergeants, we have lieutenants, captains, an inspector, and me, the chief of police. But our sergeants are the ones that have that daily impact and that daily conversations with our patrol officers, who are the ones taking the calls for service. So they are very important of the message that we relate down here from our command staff, and make sure we get it to all of our patrol officers, saying that we're going to have courageous conversations with each other and also with our community members. One of the biggest things is sometimes, we get so frustrated with the way that our community members want to talk to us and treat us. And we have to understand that for so long, there's been a lot of things that they've been involved in, that they've seen, and nobody's really talked to them about that. And we deal with them on their worst day. How do we take a step back and truly listen to them and try to understand where they're coming from? Not too many people here at the Beloit Police Department understand or know that I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment with a brother, 2 sisters, my mom and my stepdad, 2-bedroom apartment. So me and my siblings, we shared a room. I didn't sleep in my own bed until I was 13 years old. So, because me and my brother had to share a bed. But I understand what my community members go through. And we have those courageous conversations here at the Beloit Police Department. One thing that we created after the unfortunate events with George Floyd was having those courageous conversations with our minority officers, being able to go to briefings and talk to our partners and our counterparts here at the Beloit Police Department that are not people of color, and letting them understand what we have to go through on a daily basis. Me driving a marked squad car home, sometimes I see a police officer, I'm like, man, what did I do? Is my license good? Do I got my seatbelt on? And letting them know that you probably don't have to go through that. So there's so much things that's built up in us that we have to be able to get our message out, understand what our community is going through, and truly listen to them. And it starts, like Chief Norman said, it starts with our sergeants, getting them up to speed and letting them know that, hey, we got your back, but at the same time, you have to relay that same message. The tone sometime of patrol is off of the tone that the sergeant gives during briefing. I try to get to as many briefings as I can to make sure that tone is right, because we may have a briefing for 30, 45 minutes and everybody walks out ticked off, and then next, they're ticked off out on the street. But let's have some positivity in these briefings to make sure we're going out and treating our community members with respect and dignity. And that's the biggest thing here, is having those courageous conversations, making sure we're listening to each other, sitting down, rolling up the sleeves and saying, you know what, I'm not going to like what that person says, but guess what? I have to look at it from their viewpoint and make sure we implement it as a police department.
Thank you for that, Chief Sayles. So, Mr. Barrett, I'm going to ask you the same question, Sheriff Barrett. And I'm asking for someone who's from Dane County. The reputation for a Dane County sheriff, just for people who don't know, is internally, it's not really well for people of color. Externally, we're okay, but internally, we don't do well with people of color. So that's perception of the culture. That I don't know if that's true or not, right? I said perception. I don't know if it's true or not. How do you, being the new sheriff, deal with, one, that perception, but the culture? How do you feel leading? I know you haven't started yet. I know May 9th is today, but how do you feel like you're going to go in and kind of deal with leading that culture with the vision you have?
Right. Well, first off, I understand that, whatever the perception may be from the outside, but in reality with our communities, a lot of times perception is reality. And whether it's true or not, it's important for me to come in as a leader and really set the tone in regards to the expectations that I want from the top, that'll trickle all the way down through my chief deputy, through my captains, through my lieutenants, through my frontline supervisors, my sergeants, and even the officers. I think it helps with hiring deputies that reflect the communities that we serve. And that is just not in regards to race, but also in sexual orientations, gender identification, and gender itself. So I believe if we have an agency that reflects the community we serve, that will help change that perception. I believe Chief Barnes talked about a word that's very big in my vocabulary and in my leadership style, and that's proximity. And I believe that proximity breeds care and distance breeds fear. So the more that we're not connected with our communities, the more that fear is going to come up and that perception is going to be built. The more we have, the closer we are with our community members, it will change that perception one call at a time. And again, it's not a sprint, right? This is a marathon, something that needs to be taken each contact, each town hall meeting, each good time, each bad time, which will allow us to start building those relationships and changing whatever the perceptions that may be, whether they're true or whether they're not.
Thank you for that. Okay, so we have a lot of questions. So I'm going to start to get to we have a lot of questions, which we do that coming in here. So I don't expect all of you to answer all these questions. You answer if you want to. Just want to make sure I'm not going to go through how I've been everyone because I just want to get to all these questions as much as we can. But I'm going to start with you, Chief Sayles. We have a lot of questions about unions on here, a lot of questions. Are unions too powerful? Are police unions too powerful?
Well, I'm just getting into dealing with the unions, but one of the biggest things is having those, once again, courageous conversations with them, letting them know that they need to read up on the laws, our policies, and understand the progressive discipline actions that we will take here at the Beloit Police Department or any other department, and let them know that, there's times that, unfortunately, we're going to have to tell a person, see you later. Thank you for your time here at the whatever police department, but they're no longer a fit for our department, and getting the union to be on board with that. I know sometimes we want to save people jobs, but we also have to understand that we have to save lives out on the street, and we can't have people doing things wrong against our policies. It's having those conversations with our union representative boards and letting them know that, I know here I have monthly meetings with our union, and we talk about certain things, and I want them to understand, that once again, if you're that quote unquote bad apple, that bad apple's not going to be in my bunch. It's just unfortunate, but hey, it is what it is. My job is to protect the community and protect good police officers here at the Beloit Police Department.
Yeah, thinking one bad apple just ruins it for everyone. I mean, it's so obvious to me that, like, in any business, one bad apple, that just ruins it for everyone. But I get it. Does anyone else want to answer this union question? I know it's a tough question for y'all. Does anyone else want to answer that question? Okay, I'll move on. How do your academies and ongoing training, and I'm going to come to you, Chief Norman, on this one. How do your academies and ongoing training incorporate racial education? And how do you speak to your officers about de-escalation techniques?
Well, you have to make it part of the everyday communication and communicate as much as you can. We are a regional training center, so we have the capacity to do a lot of, Southeastern, even statewide training. And we have some of the best training when it comes to, fair and impartial policing, procedural justice, implicit bias. This is where we have to make it as often and as conversational as possible so that people understand and know what's expected of them. I've a longtime instructor myself. I believe in, again, the lifelong learner. I'm fully supportive of training. I've learned de-escalation early in life, but, just being honest, respecting humanity, you should not be too quick to want to take away from it. So it should be a situation where it's kind of unfortunate we have to kind of talk about that often, but training, especially de-escalation, takes on a new effort with the situation we're seeing across the nation of what are we training our officers? Are we talking more about conflict resolution, de-escalation, communication? Again, you're talking about implicit bias. When I came in, which was, over 25 years ago, one of the things that we're talking about more was, again, that training, which is the physicality aspect of getting, behaviors under control or firearms. So we really have a watershed moment of, just executives across the nation as officers, chiefs. What are we training our personnel, and how often you're going to come across situations that we train more of? So for me, de-escalation is part of my vocabulary. Having conversations about, I was part of a fair and impartial example where, I had a situation that happened to me up in Door County that they used my example and went nationwide with that particular recording, because just as Chief Sayles talked about, we as leaders have to have crucial and very accountable and transparent conversations. So I was going to put myself out there. And I think that's important as leaders to be able to be behind that and to push it and to expect it.
Can I back him up just a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I agree with everything Chief Norman said. He's exactly right. And something that he said really resonated with me is that the types of training that we do. And so there's lecture-based trainings, and then there's scenario-based trainings. And when I was in Greensboro, I was the captain of the training division, 700 officers. And, initially I went in and I did, what the chief said, have this training. racial sensitivity. I think it was called minority sensitivity training. And officers come in, and within 10 minutes, they're on their phones or they are checked out. I'm just going to tell the truth. They are not paying attention when you walk in and say, you're all insensitive, you're all racist, and then they check out. And then you go through the slide deck, they sign the little sheet, and they go to lunch. And that's not what we need in police work. We need some information, but what we need is more scenario-based trainings where we're going through different scenarios in real time with real actors in the police department, that the scenario is trained for the officer to work through those skills that you teach them in the classroom. I had an opportunity to work with a group called Will Interactive out of Washington, D.C. And they created virtual reality training glasses for police officers when dealing with people for mental health. My role on that project was the subject matter expert. I didn't help write the script. I helped correct the script so that it's actionable. Because if cops see it and it's like a cop wouldn't do that, they're going to shut down as well. I think my colleagues will agree with that. But we need that scenario-based training, and we need also the funds to do those trainings. They're not free. People won't come to your agency and train you for free, but they will give you every recommendation of every instructor group, consulting company in the country. Currently, I am asking for increased funds in my budget for training. If you divide the number of officers by my training budget, the answer is $90 per officer, right? What can you do with that, right? That will barely get you to Milwaukee and back. So we need to make sure that we not only challenge these people who are on this call, but the people who we are responsible to, our elected officials, so that they give us the tools that we need in order to be successful. And that may be another question, but since I brought it up, I'm going to keep going. We need to make sure that, these men that you see on this call, I believe our hearts are in the right places. We have the right strategies. We want to do the right thing. But we've seen it before. People get in positions where we can help, and then the resources are pulled from them. And then you're looking at the leader saying, well, I thought you were going to do X, Y, and Z. And so what I'm saying is we need to not only support everyone who's on this call, which I certainly do, but we also need to make sure that the people who are accountable for us support us so that we can get done what our community wants. That's a interesting statement, right? Because you're talking about funding the police more. People are talking about defunding the police. And you're talking about more, but that's the different argument. Never heard that before, for money for training. I wish we had so much more time to dig into this stuff. Sheriff Lucas, I'm going to come to you next. What are the obstacles within your police departments to confront racism and racial divide between police and Black and Brown communities? And what are you going to do about it?
Well, I think policing today is so challenged by the fact that everything is seen through the 30-second video, YouTube clip, and that's where a lot of people get their perceptions of who law enforcement officers are and what they're all about. I use the analogy of a bank account. There's just about 1 million police officers, law enforcement officers around the country, and over 18,000 law enforcement agencies. And on a daily basis, those men and women go out and make contributions and deposits into that bank account by pulling someone out of a burning vehicle, by returning a lost child to his or her family, by restoring calm in the neighborhood, or certainly delivering closure to a family that's lost a loved one to violence in our communities. But it's that the withdrawal that we see on that 30-second video, or that 20-second video, or an 8-minute, 9-minute video that just drains that entire account out. So that makes it much more challenging for these men on this call and all of our counterparts around the country, the work we got to do. We have a lot of work to do in terms of restoring that honor, integrity, and trust back in our profession. But it begins with each one of us setting the example in our organizations and reinforcing the principles and ideals within the organization. But as I've heard others on this call say, we've got to also take that narrative and that conversation to our communities and have those challenging and difficult conversations. No one ever said it was going to be easy. If it was easy, again, anybody could do it. But all of us are here, I think, because we all are willing to do the hard work and make the sacrifices to make our communities better places.
Thank you, Sheriff Lucas. Sheriff Barrett, I'm going to ask you this question here. Do you feel racial profiling has played a significant role in the community's inability to trust and respect police?
Yeah, I think overall, when it comes to any segment of our life, when we have individuals being judged based off of the color of their skin, that creates a lack of trust all throughout, whatever organization it is. And I think it really comes down to when we're looking at our hiring practices, if we're hiring individuals who share the core values of our agency, and then through that, we provide them with the appropriate training, right? Not just initially in the law enforcement academy, but training that continues to go on throughout their entire career, as well as hold them to the highest professional standards, we can really start to overcome that. So I think in order for any professional to really, to evolve in our jobs, we have to have that ongoing training. And like Chief Barnes said, that starts with funding.
Okay. Y'all could tell y'all getting in those positions. Y'all talking about that money, getting that money. I hear y'all. It's a real conversation to have, though. It's a real conversation to have of training versus what to need. I think this is a good debate because I've never heard it from this perspective of we need funding to make sure our people are more prepared and better trained to do what y'all want us to do. Interesting conversation. I'm gonna come to you, Chief Barnes. After you reviewing your department's stats, traffic citations, searches, stop arrests, etc., to root out systematic racism, are you reviewing your department's stats, traffic citations, searches, stops, arrests to root out systematic racism?
I am. I think perhaps earlier I was trying to explain it when the computer started acting weird, but. So I have a PhD in leadership studies, and my dissertation was in the area of racial profiling in traffic stops. It's important to note that a disparity and disparate treatment are two different things. And I know that people sometimes point to Wisconsin as being having the highest rates of disparities in the country. I understand that, but that doesn't tell you how people are treated. And so it's important, from a standpoint of a scientist and as someone who values evidence-based policing, that they are different. And so you begin by looking at the numbers for disparities, which is really defined as a significant difference in to observe things that you're looking at. But disparate treatment is something that takes a little bit more digging into. Is looking at things like complaints. So if you're stopping more African Americans than you are the majority, why is it that the complaints aren't as high? Maybe it's because they are being treated with procedurally just, or maybe it's not. So it takes a little bit more deeper dive into looking at that. So I'll tell you a couple of things. One, I'm looking at what we're doing right now with not stopping vehicles for the equipment violations. I've looked at some data that shows that our disparities show up when we give tickets for revoked license and things of that nature, which really is between you and the DMV. And so I'm thinking about how I can establish policies so that we can reduce some of those, but I'm not complete with my analysis yet. And then the last thing I'll say is, as a police officer, I have stopped a car before for not violating the traffic law. And I'll pause for 2 seconds. The reason I did that is because the lady left a grocery store and she had her pocketbook on top of the hood of the car. The top of the car. So when I stopped her, she gave me the what for. And I don't have to explain to you what that is. I didn't do anything. Why you messing with me? I just left the thing and I just let her talk. And then I reached on top of the hood of the car and I pulled her purse down and I handed it back to her. And then we both had a pretty big laugh. Well, in North Carolina, you have to document those. And so that's documented as a traffic stop. But I would probably say if you talk to her, she'll say she was treated very well by me. So disparities and disparate treatment are not the same thing.
Okay, now we're having a conversation here. Okay, we have to bring all y'all back because I have so many other questions here. But okay, any one of y'all can jump on this question. And I think this is a real good question. Like I said earlier, my father's an attorney. I was taught at a very young age what to do, how to interact with police officers, what not to do, what my rights were, etc. And that really benefited me. I've been stopped, I'm a black man, so I've been stopped when I shouldn't have been stopped, etc. So I think this is a really good question because I can see whoever this, you could tell is a parent asking this question. Do any of you have a curriculum or materials you encourage parents, mentors to use to help their children with regards to understanding policing? And how can we help parents educate on this? It's a really good question. Do any of you know anything on that? Chief Sayles, like you want to say something?
Yeah, I say one of the big things is when we put out and we have these community town halls, show up. There's been so many times over the last 3 to 4 years that we here at the Beloit Police Department have had the town hall meetings, and there's 5, 6, 8 people there. And it is the individuals that are 65 and older. And people miss out on those opportunities when we're doing the use of force training. I've been a defense and arrest tactic instructor for 13 years. I'm one of the master instructors for the state of Wisconsin. And when we talk about use of force, what is the use of force? What force are we using? There's 6, 7, 8 people there. And it's the individuals that are not committing the crimes in the city of Beloit, or the ones that had children that may have had to have a wrist compression because they were acting out in school. And they missed that opportunity to be educated on why we do some of those things. We did a traffic stop when then Chief Zabowski was here. And I think we had 10 people show up, 2 high school students. And I got kind of excited. And I asked them, hey, what are you ready to learn today? And they were like, well, my teacher said I have to come here and I'm going to get extra credit. So boom, they were lost right from the beginning because they just had to show up. They had to have us sign that piece of paper. They weren't there to educate themselves. They were there just to get that extra credit and then be done with it. So there's things that we do here at the Beloit Police Department that we're going to start doing. Our town hall meetings, we're going to have twice a year. And then we're also going to have community response meeting where my officers and sergeants are going to go out and have those quarterly meetings with the people in the neighborhoods. And we're going to put it on our social media accounts. Please show up. That's your opportunity to ask those questions and us to respond to it. And you can get that response from us, not somebody that's on an internet website and you don't see their face and they're giving you some garbage that is not true and not factual. And you're actually talking to the officers in your area that's saying, hey, this is what we do here. And this is what you can and cannot do. This is what you should do. You should not have your kids putting all these speakers in their cars and they're rolling through a neighborhood, shaking everybody's house, things of that nature. So that's the biggest thing. Show up when we ask for you to come and speak with us because we want to educate you and be transparent about what we're doing.
Thank you for that, Chief. I think it's a really important. I don't think we educate our community enough about what you can and can't do besides hearing in the Jay-Z song or something. Like, we really don't educate our youth what they should be doing. So we have 2 minutes left. Chief Barnes, you want to say something? Looks like.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, to echo what Chief Sayles stated, be careful what you listen to. There's a lot of people on YouTube that's going to tell you your rights. And some of them may be attorneys, but that doesn't mean the information is correct. And so, go to your local police department, establish a relationship with your local neighborhood-oriented police officer so you can hear it firsthand from someone who's doing the job. I do know as far as a curriculum, the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, NOBLE, partnered with Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated Guide Right program to develop a curriculum, and it was part of their national convention that was held in Charlotte a couple of years back. They actually created a curriculum that can be taught by members of NOBLE to community groups and organizers about what to do when stopped. So I thought it was a great curriculum because I'm a member of NOBLE and obviously because I'm a member of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity.
Here we go. So
it's going to be amazing.
Here we go. Now we just lost the whole conversation. Here we go.
Just got to tell the truth. I just got to.
Okay, Jim, I want to respect your time. I'm going to push back on you Chiefs a little bit, though. Barnes and Sayles, you both talk about people coming to you. I would say make sure you go to them because a lot of people are not going to feel comfortable coming to you. The more you show up in the communities, the more you can educate people in the communities and tell them what's going on, partner with organizations like the Boys and Girls Club, et cetera, YWCA, and getting in the communities and finding different ways of social media to connect and educate people is going to be the way to do it. Because you're right, town halls, a 65-year-old is going to come to the town hall. It's not going to be the 19-year-old, the 15-year-old. So you got to go to them and be able to trust. But education, like I said, survive, young man, a young lady, survive and come back. Okay, I'm going to let each of y'all say one thing before y'all go. I'm going to start with Sheriff Lucas. Sir, what do you want to leave our audience with?
Oh, let me thank you, Mr. Sanders, and let me thank Madison 365 for bringing this group together. Listen, as we move forward in this era that we're in right now in reimagining law enforcement, all of us play a role in that. It's not just the police, but every segment of our communities. And only then can we then imagine and have the law enforcement that all of our communities ask for and desire. So I look forward to partnering with the communities, not only here in and around Milwaukee County, but all across the state and all across the country to make our profession the proud and noble profession that it is. And I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sheriff Lucas, for joining us. It was an honor to have you, sir. I'll come with I'll stick with the sheriffs right now. Sheriff Barrett.
Hey, I just wanted to thank you and Madison 365, but also the other chiefs and sheriffs on this call and everyone who's listening, because this is just a great opportunity for us all to be together and really share knowledge with our community. I would like to leave everyone listening and whoever's going to watch this in the future to say, come join us. We need you by our side, side by side, working towards this new vision of 21st century policing. And we need your perspective. We need your life experience. We need everything in our law enforcement agencies to help us move in that direction. The Sheriff's Department is currently hiring right now, teamdane.com. Join us and be a part of our growth. I look forward to seeing everyone at some point in an interview or swearing you in soon. Thanks.
You're not even in a job. You know the website and everything. Look at you. Ready. Chief Norman, I'll come to you.
Thank you for not having me go after, Sheriff Lucas. He's a hard act to follow, but I appreciate all the words. So I also want to chime and echo. Thank you, Henry, for inviting me to be part of this panel and Madison 365. And I actually am humbled on this particular effort. I thought it was the greatest thing since sliced bread, but I guess I really am a shadow many of these individuals on this panel here. I was loving, Chief Barnes until he had to throw out there, that organization or something like that, because 5 is the best. But, coming back and, wrapping around back to, things that, Sheriff Barrett said and Sheriff Lucas talked about 21st century policing and in our community effort. I heard early in my career that, public safety is a team activity. So it means that we all have a role to play in regards to making our community safe, but also working together and finding ways to communicate more and to understand each other's perspectives. I am so proud to be a part of this panel, seeing so many level-headed, well-rounded, intelligent African-American males. And I understand that that is where the tone is set for the respective organizations, but the olive branch is also extended to our partners, whether it's our city leaders, our community, stakeholders, and most important, our residents. So I'm proud to be part of this, and I am dedicated and pledged to being part of the solution, and look forward to many more communications and conversations. Thank you.
Thank you, Milwaukee. We appreciate you, Chief Norman. I'll come to you, Chief Sayles.
Once again, Henry, thank you very much for this opportunity. I had to check it out first. When I got that message on LinkedIn, I was like, somebody trying to spam me. It wasn't spam, but I appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate everyone throughout the state of Wisconsin that's logged in and watching this. Just please look at the screen. You have some very well-rounded, level-headed guys that's leading the charge in the change and the reform in policing. We're doing this just because we want to, and sometime throughout our life, we may have suffered injustices, and we want to make sure that policing is in the right hands going forward. Being a trainer myself for the last 13 years, I always harp on that when I train. Be the best that you can be, but also be compassionate about the people that you're dealing with. And that's one of the biggest things that we're going to start moving forward here at the Beloit Police Department. And I'm going to steal a plug from Sheriff Barrett there. Beloit Police Department is hiring also. We're going to be open until May 10th. Come and work for us, man. One of the greatest places in the city or in the state to work for. And I believe Milwaukee, Madison, Dane County, and Milwaukee County, and all the other agencies throughout the state of Wisconsin are great places to work for. So please get out there, be that change within the agencies that you want to work for. Come join us and bring your bright ideas to policing. So therefore we can actually make a change in what we need to make changes into. So once again, thank you guys for your time.
Sayles, and hopefully stay in touch, brother. And I love Beloit. Beloit's like a second home to me. So thank you for what you're doing there. Chief Barrett, now Chief, you know I can't why I let you laugh because you Madison. So don't mess up. Chief.
Hey, pressure creates diamonds. Chief Norman knows that. Let me simply say thank you to Madison 365. Thank you to Henry and everyone who came on this call, especially to my colleagues. Hopefully we will stay connected. I consider everyone on this call a mentor to me now, and I certainly appreciate that. You know, when it comes to policing, there are some that want to defund it, some that want to reframe it, reimagine it, but simply put, I just want to fix it. I want to create a police department that our community is proud of. I want to create a police department that is compassionate and exhibits that compassion through our dedication to service. A compassionate police department that's harm-focused, intelligence-led, problem-oriented, evidence-based, and sustainable, meaning you don't see us good one day and see us bad the next. I think our community deserves that. And I think with the mentorship of the people that I see on this call, the accountability of the people who tune into this call, I think we can achieve that here in Madison and any other community. So thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you, Chief Barnes. And I know there's a lot of questions I didn't get to. There's a question that I didn't ask. Yeah, I'm sorry I got to what I could. We had an hour with these gentlemen. If I get a chance again to get them back on, I will. I was not trying to not answer, ask the question that you want. I did what I could. So forgive me if I did not get to your question. Thank you, Sheriff Barrett, for everything that you're doing. And thank you. We're proud for you and we're happy for you. And we want you to succeed. Chief Norman, thank you for everything you're doing in Milwaukee. We appreciate you for coming on, man. I love your energy, so appreciate it. And Chief Sayles, thank you for everything you're doing and joining us. And make sure that Beloit keep doing what you're doing, man. So thank you for everything. Chief Barnes, thanks you so much for taking the job in Madison. It's not easy all the time, but thank you. And Sheriff Lucas, I'm humbled that you've joined us, and I respect you, and I know your family's here in Madison too. So thank you for joining us. But I will say, leave with you black men this. And this is not politically correct, but it's true. As black men, y'all have a higher standard for our community. And there's an expectation for us because y'all are there. It might not be fair. It is what it is. So as black men, we expect y'all to do what you can to keep these organizations accountable. Y'all use accountable. Keep them accountable for our communities and make sure our babies are safe. And we are keeping y'all are there as black men. And what I loved about what all y'all said, none of y'all did not like y'all want black men to have a black experience. And that, to me, gives me hope that y'all understand the struggle that some of our kids and our youth, our men and women are going to the community. So I'll leave it with that. I love everything y'all doing. Keep the faith. I'll be praying for everyone of y'all. And hopefully we'll see y'all next time in the next town hall next time. Thank you for joining us.
This is 365 Media.